The anemone tendrils you see in the test really just are Sully's hair. The hairs are fatter, they're a different color, they're tapered at the end, and they're being pulled up instead of pushed down by gravity, and they're waving around. Other than that, it's really just hair. The final anemone was much more complicated than that. Each tendril is really a cloth sac. There's a lot more control over how they move, and of course they look completely different. The tendrils getting out of the way of the little ball as it goes through is an automatic thing. Nobody had to animate that. The simulation just does that. Most of the time, once you get it set up, that works pretty well, but sometimes, well, I really don't want this tendril here, I have to get out of the way.
There were definitely some situations where the tendrils around the characters didn't do the right thing just out of a simulation. So Cameron Miyazaki, one of our new guys, we gave him the challenge of animating the tendrils. He animated them beautifully well, and that's what you see in the film today. 99% simulation and 1% animation.
To light the reef, it takes probably about 10 broad lights, but then when you add the characters, it could take up to 100 or more. There's a key light, which is kind of an overall bright light that determines the direction of the light. There'll be the caustic light, that dancing light on the ground that's coming through the water. There's also a bounce light, usually from the sand. It's kind of a low-level bounce coming back up onto your props and fish. There'll be an overall kind of bluish fill. There's the murk and the fog lights. And when you put all those together, you get this gorgeous-looking reef.
Back in A Bug's Life, we discovered that presenting nature on screen meant simplification. We went diving, and we discovered that a coral reef could be broken down into 3 simple ideas: tall vertical things, big flat horizontal things, and round masses. So if you ignore the ground plane and the ceiling that is the ocean surface, you could have a 3-dimensional environment where you had those 3 ideas that you could present to an audience. That was our formula for constructing the coral reef.
I wanted to spend some time with him. He said, let's go take a walk. And so my little 5-year-old and we went up, and we were just going to walk down about 2 blocks to the park. And I thought, oh, it's father-son time. And I spent the whole walk just going, oh, stay away from the curb. Don't touch that. You don't know where that's been. Oh, careful from that. Oh, there's a car. Oh, be careful. Careful of that branch. You know, and I just spent the whole time correcting him and overprotective and making sure he didn't get hurt. And I just remember this other part of myself watching myself going, you are just losing every opportunity. You're just missing out right now on being present with your son. And that just, I couldn't stop thinking about that. I thought, geez, you know, here I am just wanting so badly to be a good father, yet I'm not achieving that. And so I thought, what a ironic dilemma. I thought, you know, fear can deny a good father from being there. And that intrigued me. And that became the missing link to putting all the pieces together for what ultimately became Finding Nemo. I just always remember looking at fish and sensing how much light went through them. So that was one of the first things I sort of threw at them. I said, can we make that?
What makes fish look so different from just a piece of plastic, basically, is that there's several layers working together with light to create this look.
And for a long time, we didn't have a word for it, a phrase for it. And finally, I was just like, it's like gummy bears. It's like when you put the gummy bears, you can hold the light, and so it ended up becoming the catchphrase. We just call it the gummy.
Father Nemo, their illumination is probably 80% this gummy substance in them, and then we just augment with surface lighting to get it to look like, you know, they've got some sort of surface on top of all of that so you can read their face. Because if they're too gummy, then you can't see any detail, you can't read any expression. So it's like finding that right balance to get them to look like they're both glowy and readable at the same time.
An explosion underwater has some different sort of properties than ones in air do. You typically get this fireball that goes big, gets small again, and leaves behind it a mushroom cloud of smoke that rises up through the water. Lighting also plays a huge component in connecting each one of the explosions to the ones that are local to it, so that when one of these things popped off, it would flash on all its neighbors, who would also then move them out. They'd pop off, they'd light the ones next to them, and carry on and so forth, all the way through the entire set until the whole thing is like one big popcorn explosion of red and orange and yellow and horribleness.
Andrew was very clear that he wanted this
the shot like we've never done before at Pixar. So we use an extremely wide lens, which allowed us to get the camera really close to everything in the tank. And we're moving incredibly fast through a very small space, hitting very specific visual marks to tie in with the story. From a lighting perspective, the shot also presents a difficult challenge insofar as there are setups for inside the tank clean, inside the tank with algae, outside the tank in the air, outside the tank in the baggie moving indoors and outdoors in several sets.
Well, we needed to figure out how jellyfish moved for one, and that was kind of what this was all about. And this was also to figure out give them something to figure out all of the dynamics down below with.
We began by taking simple spheres as standards for jellyfish and sprinkling them in the volume and pointing a camera that direction. We had no idea how complicated the path was going to be from that attempt at a simplistic view of the set to fully realizing the set with all the jellies moving all different directions, the camera flying through that in 3 dimensions, with no reference for ground plane, ceiling, or walls, the characters interacting with the jellies being see-through, and the whole thing together became quite a mess to untangle.
Quite a Pandora's box, this little guy right here. But it was worth it because it's beautiful in the film. It's a beautiful scene.
The most important elements to make the tank look believable in the set that it was in was the use of reflections and refractions, looking from outside in and inside back out. Took both videotape footage, stuck our heads in tanks, stuck our heads outside tanks, and stared at the fish in the tank downstairs to really get a sense for how the image gets warped and distorted by the glass and water interface. The effect itself, the physics are well understood. To do it in computer graphics cheaply is hard, and especially to cheat it so we can control it, which is one of the key things about it. And so we weren't able to just duplicate physics correctly. We needed to put controls into it, adjust it, and touch it.
In a big action scene like the Pelican sequence, we'll oftentimes build much more footage than we'll end up using in the final film.
I think this was 3 to 1, approximately. The footage that we created and then the shots that were actually used in the final film.
What we actually did in the scene is, we knew the basic action that needed to happen.
God.
Take off with Father and Dorian, his beak, swoop into the water, and then fly off and chase by the seagulls. What we did was we basically blocked out that entire action flying around the harbor and then filmed it lots of different ways. Big wide shots, tracking shots, shots moving through the air, shots locked on the ground, panning, seeing them go by, and we just really went to town building a huge amount of footage, and then we found the final scene in the editing room.
Broke it out into like what we call hero shots and crowd shots. Justin and the whole crowd group would get together and they would do the huge kinds of fish or in the net. Most of the close-up shots were hand animated.
The net itself, though, is in some shots hero, because we couldn't get that kind of close connection between net and fish without animating by hand. But in far shots is done simulated. But of course, the simulator doesn't do it all exactly right. Some fish have the tail sticking out, some fish get stuck outside the net, and want to go back in, which is of course completely insane. So you have to kill those fish and clip the other fish off to make them fit inside the net shape. And there was a whole team of folks who had to work on that stuff with animators to make sure that the amount of activity of the fish, how anxious they were in the scene, how organized or chaotic they were, is all controlled through the scene across all those cuts.